thing. I'm pleased to see such a turnout. It makes me really glad that we decided to organize this. I'm Joanna Wolfe. I am chair of the SEAS Research Committee, and speaking today, and I'm going to do a presentation on a survey that we did this fall on where people are getting external research funding. And then we've invited, the research committee has invited 4 people who have recently received grants. Paul Anderson's going to present on a grant he received from the National Science Foundation, Carol Rutz on a grant from the Spencer Research Foundation, Cheryl Ball on NEH, and Linda Bergman. Linda, are you here? Linda Bergman, hopefully, on Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. And we're going to hear some notes from a session that was held at the Writing Research Across Borders conference, discussing where several heads of funding agencies came and presented on some of the things that they are looking for in research proposals. I want to go ahead and start by talking about our research survey. This was done last fall. An email was sent out to SEAS members through the central organization, and we also hit major listservs, WPA, ATTW, Writing Center. We asked people to self-report any external research grants and grants that were non-institution specific, so grants that other people could apply for, not at one specific institution. So any grants received in the past decade. We had 67 grants reported. This is all self-reported information. So what I am presenting today is what people self-reported. I haven't gone through and vetted it except for looking for, there were a couple places where there multiple people were working on a project and they both reported it, so I took that out. But this is all self-reported information. So, most important question, where are people getting funding? Here are our top 6. And as you can see here, National Science Foundation and Spencer Research Foundation are at the top of the list in terms of number of projects and dollar amounts received. And there's a big drop to the next set in terms of total dollars funded, with the Social Science and Humanities Research Council of Canada around $300,000, NEH about $200,000, and National Writing Project. So these are the ones where people have multiple projects. And again, NSF and Spencer seem to be the top money getters. Some others that were just one project but are worth noting are, we've had a SEAS member receive grants from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, U.S. Department of Education, FIPSI, which I'm not sure is still giving grants for art.
Right now.
What's that?
There's actually a call out right now.
There is a call out right now. Okay, great. Fulbright, I'm not sure if that should be included with this or thought of separately, but SEAS members, of course, are getting Fulbright grants. In terms of smaller dollar amounts, International Writing Centers Association has funded a number of small range grants. You can see the range here from $250 to $3,000. Council for Programs in Scientific and Technical Communication, also some small grants. And here's another list of smaller budgets with one project. Several of these for several rhetoric-based projects from AAUW, the American Academy of Rome, that was for a rhetoric project, Engineering Information Foundation, less rhetorical, on their International Society for History of Rhetoric, Learn and Serve America, Council of Writing Program Administrators, and Pearson Higher Education. So these are things that people reported. We just had one project reported on here. Also, we got a lot of people reporting regional funds. So these are only if you live in a certain state area. And this ranges from the Bush Foundation, which is for Minnesota and the Dakotas, a $1 million grant from them, to a $1,000 grant from North Carolina. So these are ones that are region specific. Now, one question that I was really interested in was in the methods and the methods that C's members were using in these projects. And as you can see here, the most popular methods overall are interview, with 74% of the grant proposers saying that their project involves some sort of interview methodology, and observations and surveys. And going down in popularity, textual analysis also pretty high. I broke this information down by the dollar amounts of the grants. So this first bar here, over in the red, there we go. This is for the smaller grants, less than 10,000. Beige is the medium size, and the blue are the larger grants, 50,000 or more. First thing to take from this chart is that the larger grants are using more methods overall. There's a higher percentage of them using interviews, much higher percentage using observation, higher percentage using surveys, everything except for the archival research. Observations here makes a lot of sense. To do really detailed ethnographic observations takes quite a bit of time, money, and things. Surveys I found interesting though, because when I talk about surveys in my research methods class, I always describe it as a really cheap methodology. Doesn't always give you a lot of information, but it's not much work. It's not much effort to run a survey, and it's usually pretty easy to analyze. So, while some of these I understand why it would be the bigger, we would see such a big difference in the larger grants, I'm not sure with the surveys why that is. Another thing that's really worth noticing here is the quasi-experimental research grants, research methods. Going from none of the smaller grants used a quasi-experimental methodology to close to 40% of the larger grants. Again, that makes sense. To do a good quasi-experimental research study requires some funding. It's very hard to do without that funding. Now, I broke this down. I wanted to look at the top 3 in terms of number of projects, grant organizations, and look at what they were funding and what advice people had. So the National Science Foundation had 16 projects. The asterisk is there because 10 of those projects were reported by the same researcher who was in an engineering education department. And that might influence some of these results. But even without those 10 reported, it's still six projects. Even without those 10 reported, 4 of those 6 would mention engineering. It seems that where people in our community are really getting the funding is for grants that mention engineering in some ways. And if you know something about trends in engineering, that makes a lot of sense. Communication is a really big deal in teaching engineers how to communicate. 38% mentioning teamwork, 25% mention ethics or social justice, 13% mention gender. Some of the advice people have: collaborate with faculty from other disciplines. This is a common theme in here. Target a specific problem, answer the so what, provide a detailed methodology. And these were by far from this NSF were the largest grant amounts overall. So, and those were also the grants that had the more detailed, more robust methodologies in here. Now, Spencer Foundation, I went ahead and took these 6 grants and describe the project. So I just want to review these. So one project is investigating the connections between faculty development and student learning. Another, looking at the efficacy of argument diagramming. Assessing a writing in the disciplines approach to a discipline-specific subject. A grant for enhancing traditional and innovative approaches to advanced composition. Assessing changes in critical thinking over time. Investigating the relationships between composing processes and place-based narratives. What strikes me about these grants that are being funded by Spencer is just how central they are to the work of teachers here. These are very practical. As someone who runs a writing program, I'm like, yeah, I want to know what the answers to these are. I want to know if faculty development has any impact on student learning. Or if critical thinking, how does that change over time? Or does argument diagramming work? These are really pretty central, basic, not in a pejorative sense, but basic in terms of a foundational sense, types of projects. Of these 6 projects, 5 included an assessment component, and that was the rating of student essays as one of the measures in there. 3 of these describe the projects as quasi-experimental. Most of them used interviews and those other more common methodologies. Some of the advice from Spencer. This is also, I think, very key advice. Don't expect funding the first time around. Don't give up after one rejection. I've heard this from lots of people who are experienced with NSF as well. Apply again. Incorporate reviewers' advice and explain in your proposal how you address those reviewers' concerns. Also from Spencer, the foundation has a lot of emphasis on helping underrepresented groups, and so making a case even on these basic grants, on these basic projects, how this will help underrepresented groups. For the NEH, I also listed the types of projects. Analyzing a collection of unpublished letters, some work in classical rhetoric, study of literacy in a particular community, developing an online environment to bring together various groups, and building a content management system to support journals and presses. And this makes sense for the NEH. These projects are really central to our work in rhetoric and rhetorical analysis, and also in the latter 2, which I believe are both in the digital humanities strand of NEH, building, support building, community building, infrastructure building. Some of the advice from the NEH is, again, keep trying. If you get rejected, incorporate reviewers' feedback, resubmit. Go ahead and collaborate with other units, and don't make it just about RepCon. Make it about something bigger, something central to that funding agency's concerns. So those are the results from the survey so far, my initial pass at the data. I'm going to invite Paul up here now to talk about his project with NSF.